The IMF's suspension of Senegal's active extended credit facility program still hangs in the balance. This after it emerged that between 2019 and 2023, the West African nation's government underreported fiscal deficits and the state's debt levels. More recently, the country's finance ministry reported that its debt servicing costs jumped by nearly 45% in the fourth quarter of 2024 and rose by 23.9% in the first quarter of this year. François Conradie, lead political economist at Oxford Economics Africa, joins us with his analysis of Senegal's fiscal uncertainty and what it suggests for its economy moving forward. François, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. And perhaps as we get started, just take us through the state of Senegal's fiscal position. We are seeing high debt levels and a growing budget deficit.
Yes, I mean, the political context is that this is a new government that was elected early in 2024, sworn in April, and very soon after they came in, it started becoming apparent that the previous government, the outgoing government of President Macky Sall, had lied about the debt position. And since then, it's been very opaque. There's been a lot of commitments to communicating, and then there has now recently been a report coming out that was published giving the true debt picture. But the long period of uncertainty has complicated the relationship between the government and the IMF, and now we don't know where that's standing. And then the very worrying debt position is worrying bond traders. So now the Senegalese euro bonds due in 2033 lost again ground yesterday after Barclays published a special report on Senegal, and it's just a picture of debt distress. Though on the bright side, economic growth is looking very good, thanks to oil and gas coming online. So that's the picture.
And has there been an update on the IMF program? Are there discussions for a new program in motion, or is it still quiet on that front?
Discussions are presumably ongoing. So there was a staff mission to Senegal that left in March or April, I think. And since then, it's been quiet. So that means that the findings of the staff mission are now the subject of discussions between the government and the IMF board. But it does seem like there's some kind of deadlock, and recent statements from the Senegalese government make the government sound sort of defiant, intransigent, and unwilling to budge on the things that the IMF wants to see reforms to, which is specifically subsidies, and tax exemptions, which we call tax expenditures.
And talk to me about sentiment on that front. I mean, I can imagine that when you don't have much support from the IMF, that can weigh on how you strike deals with other financiers.
Exactly right. Yes. So there again, it's not. We don't know what's going on. So despite the fact that we don't hear from the IMF, in June, the World Bank decided to lend Senegal $115 million, which is a positive sign. And I mean, these two lenders typically coordinate. So so the IMF is aware of that disbursement. And then what's also strange is the mismatch, although the maturities are different, that the Eurobond is being punished so harshly on markets that it's now the worst performing emerging markets paper in the year to date. Yesterday the yield was over 13%. But at the same time, on the regional market, the Senegalese government is borrowing in francs at under 7.5, which is also odd. So it's a very fluid and uncertain picture.
And with that uncertainty in place, is Senegal perhaps looking at exploring ties with other nations, perhaps China?
Yes, it is. So again, for political reasons, the incoming government of President Bassirou Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko have from the get-go made it clear that they were going to diversify ties and no longer have Senegal be so reliant on its partnership with France.
Mm.
And yeah, so Sonko was in Beijing last week and he met President Xi Jinping there. There was a talk of financial assistance. There was talk of investment,
Yes.
where the Chinese were talking about renewable energies and investments in technology to create jobs, because Senegal has quite a serious youth unemployment problem. And next week, on July 7th, Sonko is going to be in the United Arab Emirates. So there too, you can expect that there's going to be some talk of financial assistance. Where the Emiratis are typically they transfer funds. They don't set up companies, unlike the Chinese investors.
Right. Now, I was reading that in an attempt to become a bit more self-reliant, the West African nation is pushing for tax reform, basically looking at boosting tax collection to, of course, cut reliance on foreign aid. How has the response been to that? Also considering that many Senegalese citizens are struggling with a cost of living crisis.
Yes. So Sonko and Fai, both of them come from the tax administration. They're very experienced tax professionals, and there has been success. So we've seen the budget execution numbers for Q1 of this year came out not long ago, and they did manage to boost revenues by almost 10%, 9.7% year on year, so compared to the same quarter of 2024, while at the same time limiting the growth in expenditures to under 3.5%. So they are doing what they said they were going to do, which is to boost revenues and contain expenditure growth. And they do that partly by targeting inefficient tax exemptions and fraud. So there has been successes on that front. But we worry that, the big wins are now won, and that from this point on, it's going to be harder to keep that success going.
Talk to me about the prospects of the country. Where do you see growth at the end of the year? I know a lot of the outlooks are quite positive. There's just worry about, the debt picture.
Yes, so this is an oil and gas growth in Senegal is an oil and gas story. Oil and gas came online last year, June, and since then growth has been very impressive. So looking again at the first quarter of this year, GDP grew by 12.1%. That's a big number. Our forecast is for full year GDP growth this year to be over 8%, 8.5%. And then we see it slowing to 5% next year, again, as the big jump, the big win moves into the past, and then you growth takes on a more normal profile. But look, these are big numbers. That's a very impressive GDP growth figure, and this makes it less unreasonable of the government to be optimistic about its ability to grow revenues on the top of this expanding economy and pay off debt, which I don't think we've said the number, but it's at 115% of GDP.
And just quickly before I let you go then, Francois, you mentioned that, growth is pegged on the growth we are seeing in the oil and gas industry. How closely then are you watching the tax dispute between Senegal and Woodside Energy and the possible ramifications?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's a big question related to the relationship between the government and Woodside, because of a new investment decisions that Woodside still has to make on phase 2 of Sangomar. And this is also something that Cosmos and BP, the other two multinationals operating in Senegal, are watching closely, because they also have to make more investment decisions on the gas field further north, the one that straddles the border with Mauritania. So we're watching this. So it's at the moment, a Senegalese court has issued an injunction against Woodside, and the matter is now before the Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, So yeah, this is a very important one to watch. If you're watching Senegal, you need to be watching this court case.
All right then, Francois, thanks so much for your time and just giving us analysis on Senegal's fiscal position. That was François Conradie, lead political economist at Oxford Economics Africa.